You give me a countdown when it goes.
Okay. Live. Oh yeah. There was a connection thing, so maybe we should chat. It's okay. It's all good.
Good. Right way up.
Right way up.
Perfect.
This might be a good time for a sound check.
Ah.
1 minute to 7. So this is me speaking, and this is Roger speaking.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Have we got 2 minutes to go?
Yes, that was just a sound check.
Okay. And how do you check the sound?
Somebody really helpful writes, "Oh, it sounds perfect. You don't need to do anything else."
Good. Good. That does sound.
Sounds perfect. Thank you, Antonio. And Karen and Carl. Yes.
Okay.
Lots of verifying that we sound great.
Good. Good, good. Okay. Since last week, I've tweaked it a little. I kind of, behind these two trees, I've added a kind of a tree house, and in amongst the bushes here, I've put a hint of habitation. So it's going to look like tree houses and tree villages a little bit in amongst the foliage. And I thought I'd add lilies, which it can still be a kind of a wilderness with the water lilies. So there will be flowering plants in this at some point, and I'm going to get them in there somehow. I was looking at a Victorian stroke Edwardian lady who painted gardens called Helen Allingham, and I thought she did an amazing job, because you would get little teeny pictures with incredible detail. And she did use Chinese white a little bit when it was first introduced into regular sale in this country, which would have been, for those who are interested, 1834, I think. Winsor Newton started selling it. But she quickly dropped it in favour of carving through the paint into the white paper behind. So she would carve out the shape of the flowers and then paint into it. So, and it looked amazing. It was impressive. So I might try that. And even though she rejected it, I think I'm also going to have a shot at seeing how Chinese white behaves. So Also, since last week, the kingfisher that's supposed to be part of the logo is sort of finished. I might add a little bit more feathery detail, but for now, is that on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the. It's going to not be as part of the painting, but it'll be part of the logo. So you can see I suggested a doorway here, windows here, and the foliage I think needs to come out more and overlap in this direction, and I've moved that in proportion to the rest of the painting further that way. And
somebody's asked if that's an owl in the tree. I'm going to zoom in, because actually when I walked in the room, Roger, before you added the blue and it was just white, I thought they were snowmen for a split second, because I've got Christmas on the brain.
I think you should stop thinking, Christopher. What can I say? So where would the owl be?
I think that it might have been that the window looked a bit like an owl when it was panned right back, so I've zoomed in a bit.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
maybe I might have got that wrong.
2 windows always look like eyes on a house, so it's probably better to have done 1 or 3. I'd probably do 3. Too late for 1. So I'm just going to make this tiny little bit more 3-dimensional.
We wish you Merry Christabel. Fun fact, I used to, when I was learning how to write, to sign my name Christmas, because it's a long name to learn when you're 5.
So what, learning your name or learning to spell it?
Learning to spell it.
Ah. Well, that's good. 5's not too bad. I couldn't spell my name till I was 9, and my name's simple, relatively speaking.
Well, that makes me feel slightly better, but then, you know, you can paint this.
Yeah, and I was doing exactly this when I was 5.
Yes. I'm sure I've seen one of. Here's one you made earlier, age 5.
Yes, there you go. Ooh.
What do you think of John Howe, the Tolkien artist?
What do I think of him?
Yeah, you were talking about Alan Lee before, and someone's wondering what you think of John Howe.
Oh, well, he's an incredible artist. I've spoken to him, but I've never met him. But Alan is an old friend, so I probably talked about Alan because I knew him. We published Mabinogion with his work back in the 70s. Yeah. Good grief, that was all so long ago. And we saw Alan last year down in Devon, so...
Cool.
I'm not sure where John Howe lives. I've got a feeling that he's Canadian, but that might be wrong.
I think he might be. He was one of my favourite artists when I was growing up. Not that I knew many, but I was obsessed with Tolkien, so...
Right, okay, well that would figure.
Yeah. I liked, in a similar way to you, Roger, I liked how real and substantial his paintings looked even when they were of fantastical things.
I see.
I like to be able to believe fantasy.
Like what?
I like to be able to believe fantasy, for it not to look too ethereal.
Okay. Wow. Yes, he's very clever, very good work. I've got several of his books here and I like what he does. And he's good at both drawing and watercolour painting, so that's a good guide.
Well, John Howe, if you're watching this, it's an invitation to tea.
Right.
Oh, could you talk a little bit about the technique you're doing at the moment?
I'm kind of experimenting in a way. I'm learning as I go along. So what I'm thinking of is we have a structure here, but I want it to look hard-edged, man-made, but covered in foliage. So I'm putting a background of foliage on it so I can work on top and give it a few added layers. But I probably made it too much in the shade, so when it's a little bit drier I'll take that down. It needs to be in the shade here and underneath, but there needs to be a light area there. And I'm using the edge of the brush so that it only gets on the highlights in the paper. The paper's bumpy, and if I'm using the edge of the brush it only hits the top of the bumps. So it's sort of broken up and not too even, and much more susceptible to looking like foliage in the long run. And it's coming out darker than the base leaves of the trees that I did last week. So that's what happens if it fills in, it goes too solid.
So do you sort of use the texture of the paper to help you, or to choose where the paint goes?
Yes. I mean that's normal. I do that with acrylic, and I'm doing it now with this. So I think when I'm painting trees, I almost never paint leaves. I would like to think I never paint leaves, but sometimes the temptation is there for the odd one or two. But I did in a painting called Heaven and Earth. I painted a few leaves in that. But really what I'm trying to do is paint the shape of the tree, not the shape of the leaves.
Is that like a style? Are there some artists that paint every single leaf in every tree, or is that just not really done?
What can I say? Yes, some artists do. And some artists are so good at just doing the shape of the tree that you think they've painted every leaf, but they haven't. So I guess there's lots of ways of doing it. But there is no question that if you are painting leaves, it's very unlikely that you're also painting the tree. So it's...
That definitely sounds like the translation of a haiku.
There you go. What can I say?
Something in that.
Children do the opposite, and that's interesting too, because what they will do very often is they'll do a circle on a stick like a lollipop. And you kind of get the point. Okay, that's a tree. And you might think it's more sophisticated to do a lot more detail. It probably is more sophisticated to do a lot more shape. And eventually, I guess, if you're really, really keen, you can do detail. The Pre-Raphaelites, I suppose, notoriously went in for painting leaves. And did a brilliant job too. I love that work. So what I'm doing now is taking off what I put on.
paper you're painting on?
I should know that because I use it all the time. I can tell you what it is as a description. It's a rough surfaced, heavyweight watercolour paper, and by heavyweight I mean it's up in the 640 gram range, which means it's almost like cardboard. Well, actually it is. It's as thick as some cardboard, and it makes it very much more resistant to buckling and so on when you get it wet. So when I'm painting like this, I'm not really getting it very wet, but I could completely drench it and it would still maintain its basic flat, well, more or less flat shape.
Do you have to flatten it later? Because obviously it has a tendency to curl.
No. But I do frame them, which does hold it more or less flat. It's intriguing to me as I'm washing off the paint here that it's going very cold, i.e. it's going a kind of pale bluish colour. So I'm going to need to warm that up a bit. But what I want that to be is I'm going to go back in and get the foliage look, but it's exactly where light is falling. So it should be bright like the roof, but the roof I'll get them the same eventually. And this bit here and here is definitely meant to be shadowed.
Wendell Wiggins says ask questions. I'm not sure if that's aimed at me or at you guys watching, but please do ask questions.
Well, I'm here to answer them, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't normally do watercolour, and I certainly don't normally do this. This is probably, I don't know, painting like this, it's probably one of 4 or 5, maybe 6 that I've ever done. So it's fun. It's fun finding out things and doing it. It's also fun changing it and realising that I used to think of watercolour as much more rigid, but it's actually a little bit more amenable to change.
What's the brand of watercolour that you use?
This is, I'll show you in a second. Martin Graham. I have talked about them before. They are particularly... Oh, is that too new? I can
a little bit,
away.
that's it. Okay.
Okay. They are particularly intense colours, and they're made particularly intense because they don't use gum arabic, which is the traditional base of watercolour. They use honey, which allows the colour to be much more vivid.
How long is a painting in your imagination before you paint it?
Well, you know, sometimes it appears as I paint it. So sometimes it's completely there. Sometimes I'll have done a sketch, which it means it's completely there. But even then, when I've done a sketch, you know, the painting gives me a lot of ideas as I go along. It would be insufferable if it didn't. And this does. Yeah, yes. I have started paintings without having had any thought about how it will be or even what it will be. And that's quite an interesting way for me to do it. I've always done that. Back in the very early 70s, like 1970, 71, the painting that became Green Castle, the cover of my first book, Views, was one of 5 paintings I started then. I did a painting for a band called Nitro Function with the same base colours, and I did Fly From Here and The Leap, all on paintings I started back in 1971. But they were left vague enough that I could finish them very differently in 2009 and so on when I did finish them. Very different to how I would have done them back in the 70s. But they were started then. And as I say, no real idea where they were going. And of the watercolours I've done, pretty much the same. I've started about half of them without any thought other than just getting a lot of paint on the paper and seeing what happens.
Was there a different painting for Asia Arcada before they changed their name to Astra? Did they change the name to Astra?
Title of the album went through quite a few different titles before they settled on Astra. But the painting I did and the painting I settled with the band actually stayed the same. It became Astra after we tried the other titles. And as you rightly say, Arcadia was one of them.
Why were you not involved in Going for the One and Tomato?
Tomato. It's spelt Tormato because there was a rock formation in Devon called Yes Tor, T-O-R. Those rock formations are called tors. I think it was a ridiculous misunderstanding. A lot of the band have told me they wanted to use the painting I did, but they didn't see it at the time. They were recording in Montreux, and I went out to Montreux with a painting, which was a painting I've done, which is as a print is called Flights. And it was the first floating rocks I did. And it was part of a narrative of paintings I'd done with them already. But when I arrived, John was sitting in the recording studio with an easel painting a picture, and he said, "Oh, hi, this is what I want for the cover." And I thought, well, John, it's your band, you can have what you like, but I'm not going to do anything with that. So I stayed a few days, chatted, and then went and had a look around Switzerland before going home. But the rest of the band never saw what I did. And as I said, I have been told since that they wished they'd had that cover. So did I. I should have gone beyond John and showed everybody and made sure everybody saw it. But there you go. These things happen.
Are you keeping some of the open forms in this?
Some
lovely.
Some of the what?
Open forms.
Open forms?
That's what it says.
Oh, gosh. Well, to the degree that I understand the question, my instinctive answer is yes, but I may be misunderstanding the question, which would mean that I got it wrong. It's kind of evolving in my mind, so I'd be a little bit hesitant to commit to anything at this stage, but I suspect I'm not going to fill it up. You know, there are places where it's already as full as I ever want it to go. But I will put more detail in this, and this. So this is, and probably I'm going to commit to something like water lilies in the water. So I'm going to work here and here. But I doubt if I'll do anything to the sky and the trees in the distance. I think there's enough already to define them.
You've been asked what the building in the middle, what it is.
Can't you tell? If you were wandering through the woods, so you came across that, you'd say, ha ha ha, a tea shop. Would you not?
Of course you would.
Of course you would.
What a silly question.
Yeah.
Will this painting be exhibited at Trading Boundaries?
Oh, yes. Yes, I should think so, yes. Everything I've done in the lockdown will. And as far as I can tell, we are going to do an exhibition in November, from November into December, same as last year and the year before. We're figuring on a title for the exhibition right now. So it sounds like it's going to go ahead, and if it goes ahead, everything I've done in lockdown will be there, and a lot more besides. And Michael has been converting Trading Boundaries while he's been, while they haven't been able to do business, and he's made the whole top floor into a gallery. At least he told me that was the plan. And he's making a 15-bedroom hotel on the site as well. So, yeah, he's taken the opportunity to make very big changes there. So I'm looking forward to doing a show there.
Do you ever use inks or pastels with watercolour?
Use pastel, and what was the other word?
Inks.
Ink. I have done, yes. One of the things that encouraged me to use ink was the vividness of the colours, and the fact that a lot of Victorian drawings were done in sepia and they looked fantastic. But somewhat to my horror, I discovered that those inks faded really fast and went into totally different colours, which meant that I had to rework a lot of things where I'd used ink. And I had to redo it, way back in the day, to sort of use more permanent colours. So it was a bit worrying, and it meant that I've looked out over the years, and I've got all kinds of other inks now that manufacturers have told me I should try, and that they are definitely 100% archival and will last forever. But the effort of putting right what were they? Winsor Newton, I think, was the name of the company whose inks I used. I was astounded how rapidly the colours disappeared from them. So I've kind of avoided it since I found that out. Some inks last, for a surprising long time, hundreds of years. But pencils are much more durable than ink, and paints often are. Not always, but often.
Do you still have the Never Turn Your Back on a Friend painting? And is it made only with watercolour?
I don't know where that painting is. It's one of a few that, fortunately very few, that have gone missing. And that, yeah, annoying and disturbing, that.
Where were they last seen?
Well, that's what makes it very disturbing to me, because they were last seen in my studio in Brighton.
There was a DBA post yesterday that they've changed the album title and announcing it today.
Oh yes, that's right.
Cool.
It's now back to Halcyon, and it's being called Halcyon Hymns, which I rather like, actually. I think that's a good title. And I think, I'm glad the word Halcyon is back in there, because that connects with the Kingfisher.
What was your process when you were asked to make covers for Psygnosis games? Were you approached with a brief and a vision, or were you just given artistic license?
I was given quite a lot of artistic license, actually. Yeah, that was quite good fun working with those in those days. It was yes, I wouldn't have worked with anyone more than once if there was too much interference. I'm very happy to talk to people about what I'm going to do, but to put it bluntly, if I'm working with someone who thinks they have better ideas than me, I would say, okay, I can't argue with you, but I can certainly decide not to work with you, which is probably what I would have done. It's when I do a job, I would say people come to me for as much for the ideas as for the execution of the ideas. Well, I'd say 99% for the ideas. So it would be pretty fruitless, anyone defeating the object, if anyone sort of asked me to do a job and then is feeding me ideas. Didn't stop John doing it, though.
Is there a reason why the Yes Fragile logo was not the same colour as the
It didn't have a colour. It was just a line. And the Fragile cover was meant to be a kind of pastiche of turn of the century books, the sort of semi-Art Nouveau arts and crafts movement books that were around. And that's what, when I was talking to Yes, that's what we looked at. We looked at a lot of those old books. And so the lettering and everything was sort of quasi-inspired by those lettering of that time. But I never imagined it would last as a logo, and it didn't, of course.
Dean read back in the 70s how you used to spray paint on water to get the starting point on your backgrounds. Do you still do that?
No, and I don't imagine that paint that I used back then still exists. I've not seen it in 40 or 50 years, so I've said before, I don't even know for sure chemically what it was. It said enamel on the tins. It was aerosol tins.
probably illegal now.
Well, there you go. Yes, paints are often quite dangerous chemicals, and it takes enough time to learn the ones that you use on a daily basis, which are poisonous, which are not. But to buy something in a hardware store, I guess, is quite risky, because they wouldn't have had announcements back then. Careful, this is poisonous. Now, to a degree, they do.
What, they'd have just let you find out, have a taste and see if you poison yourself.
Well, it sounds very callous, but the truth of the matter is they probably didn't know themselves. That doesn't mean they weren't careless. And I'm only guessing that they might have been toxic. I don't know. As I say, I don't know what they were. But there were a lot of things that we used on a daily basis that are pretty noxious chemicals. I mean, paints I use now can be. So, some paints you have to be extra careful with. They have heavy metal bases like arsenic and cadmium.
Did you ever hang out with Burke Shelley?
With who?
Burke Shelley from Budgie?
Oh! No.
Oh.
It was the only person I knew from Badger was Tony Kay. And I'm going to do a project with him at some point.
Do you have any plans to do an exhibition in the US anytime soon?
Well, the answer to that question prior to COVID-19 was yes. But since the amazing changes that the world's seen, I'm waiting to see if it's going to be confirmed. And my guess is that it will be confirmed, but it will be postponed. So I was due to do a major exhibition in California in early spring. And I would say, because we've had no preparation so far, that's probably going to be postponed. But the answer is yes, yes. There are plans afoot.
In your mind, is the tea room buildable, or is it just part of the painting?
All my architecture is buildable. Yeah, it's all buildable. We are going to be restoring, as I have been mentioning from time to time, the prototype architecture. And we were working on it today, defining how it would break up into bits so we could move it. It was originally done on the back of a 40-foot trailer, but it is big, and if it can be moved in small bits, I might bring it back here and work on it in the garden before we take it to a new site. So that is the current plan with that. And this would be easy to build. It's not challenging anything. It's very simple. I have designed a hotel that might get built, which is a 30-room hotel. And that is designed to look like a cluster of trees, much more hard-edged than this. If I can remember, I'll definitely show that next time we do a talk. I think I was talking to Freya and she read a question, and I quoted Sid Mead when somebody asked him how does he decide what of his design is fantasy and what is for real, and he said he designs everything to be built for real. Some of it just doesn't get built. So I knew what he meant and I understood that. That made sense. I think this is going to run into next week, although I'm much more confident now than I was earlier about how it's going to finish. And this is kind of making structural sense. When it's got more 3 dimensions on it, I'll be able to leave that alone and move on. And the trees that were there from last week are now coming forward again, and the house is beginning to, tea house is beginning to sit comfortably behind them. And I've fixed that so there's light falling on the foliage here. I'll put more detail in. So it's kind of getting there. I may or may not put a bridge into it. I'll think about that.
Did you think that curve on the right was going to be a bridge at one point, or was it always a hill?
It's always been a bridge.
It is a bridge.
Yeah. It's that. I suppose I could make sure it is seen as a bridge by having the trees show both sides of it, like here. It's the most minimal bridge though, there's hardly any structure. So I will add in more structure to it, so it's more obviously a bridge.
Which works of Kaluta do you recommend?
Which works? You mean which books?
Yes.
Give me 1 minute.
Ah.
I would say absolutely everything and anything you can get hold of. Okay, this is one of Michael's sketchbooks, volume 5, and they're quite thin. I don't know how much they are. Oh, $10. This is his Metropolis book, which is full of brilliant stuff, but it was never finished quite as a book. So it's got some lovely work in it, but some of the work which was meant decoratively is used illustratively, and there isn't, from what he showed me originally, I think there's less in it than he would have liked, but it's a brilliant book, good value. So Metropolis, and the complete sketchbooks, which it can't be, because it would need to be 10 volumes. He is a fantastic designer as well as a fantastic artist, so I don't know what to say. I love his work, and I would recommend anything artists, and it's way too long since I've seen him. God, more than 10 years.
Are there any pencil lines on this?
I thought not. but I drew that window, so there is the hint of them there. I should have not. I should have just trusted that I could do it with a paintbrush, but I tend to do my architecture with a pencil, not a paintbrush. So it's kind of a sort of weird habit to get back into and pick up a pencil, but not necessary. I should have just carried on painting.
Is there any update on your new art book?
No. I am under a lot of pressure, and I had promised that I would get that moving. I think we're going to miss the chance of getting it out this year, so it might be early next year that we finally get it out. And I'm hoping I can show proofs of pages to show how it's going along. I'm afraid it's been another week of me working quite slowly. It's odd, this, because I've resisted trying to finish it in between talks, but I think I'm going to have to do quite a bit more between now and next time we do it. So it does look like I'm going to come back next Wednesday with it much more finished, much nearer to being finished. And that's to have a look at it as a whole. It's kind of shaping up how I would like it to, but it is a bit full, and I can see that it would be good to leave as much as possible empty from now in. Certainly make enough space for the lake. But it does look like proper Kingfisher country. Because I hadn't seen any round here, because we've got a river just outside, I thought I would look up what kind of places they prefer. And of course, the river we have is tidal, and it's fairly fast flowing. So it's very hard to see the fish. And they like clearer, still water so they can see the fish. Makes sense to me.
Did you get asked to do any of the solo Yes albums covers?
When?
It's not specified. Would that be when they split and did solo projects?
I've done quite a few of Steve's. I've worked on a few of Rick's, and I've done one of Alan's. This is not a solo project per se, but it's Jeff, keyboard player in Yes, and Chris Braid. They have a band called Downs Braid Association. So it's not strictly a solo project, but it's a project outside of Yes. Yeah, I do some. Yeah.
It has just gone 7:45, depending on when you want to finish, and your battery is on low power.
Oh, really?
Which might be a factor.
It might, indeed. Okay. Well, I'm looking at this now, and I'm seeing, okay, it's kind of even and busy across its whole area, and probably won't want to take that out and move it and make more space that way. But I could make the impression of space by putting dense colour and detail in a foreground here. So that will leave that to fade gently into a background and give a better sense of space. So I will look at all these ways of moving forward with this.
Sorry, I'm aware lots of people have asked questions I haven't got to, and some of you have asked them twice. So, but I will write these all down and pester Roger and Freya to do a Q&A.
Yes, yeah,
so
that's
don't
right.
Be discouraged.
Yes. What happened is Christabel did download a bunch of questions, and subsequent to that, Freya downloaded a few more, and we did go through most of what we could last time we talked, and that went up online yesterday or the day before.
It's definitely there now.
Yes, it went up yesterday.
Yeah.
So anything from now on until, well, the sooner the better, really, because we're trying to get a little bit more ahead of doing it the day before, so we can get it up this week rather than early next week. So yeah, ask the questions, please, and we'll go through them in the Q&A. We did originally intend to do 45 minutes, not an hour, and last couple of weeks we've drifted into an hour, but taking cognizance of the fact that the battery is screaming for help, we'll do it at 45 minutes. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and please ask the questions and we'll download them and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.